Hello everyone and welcome to our next session, Go with the Data Flow. I'd like to thank you all for coming along today, and I invite you all to welcome our next speaker, Shannon Maiolo from Ingo Money.
Thank you. Well done on my name. Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon, and I am from Ingo Money, which is a check cashing and verification company out of Atlanta, Georgia. You'll notice the slight accent. I am a Major Domo at my company, and my team and I have been to, this is our fourth Domo-palooza, and this is actually my second time speaking at Domo-palooza, and I'm very honored. So my major role in my company is to I do a lot of the data management with Domo. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on this talk today. Just some tips and tricks and best practices that I use to help me manage the data in Domo, and hopefully save you guys the hassle of having to figure out some of these things. So mainly today I want you to take away a higher understanding of Domo's usability and available tools, as well as confidence in creating powerful solutions and efficient processes, and also ideas on how to solve individual issues through shared solutions. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a few issues and problems that I've encountered in my past and just how we got over it. So first of all, we're going to talk about inconvenient data input and getting user data into Domo without multiple steps and streamlining that process, as well as complex data transformation and when to use what type of data flow, and also errors when shifting data sets. So when you shift cards from one data set to another, a lot of times you encounter a lot of errors, so we're going to talk about ways to avoid that. So data input. What I'm talking about specifically is data that comes from a user's brain and is not necessarily something that is recorded or gathered by an application or a program. Things that are generally user-driven, so like employee hierarchies or budget variables from finance, or in the example I'm going to use in a second, quality assurance evaluation. So this is Chantel. She is an analyst out of our operations department, and her main function is to, or one of her main functions is to provide the QA for returned checks. And her general process for doing this is she logs into Domo, she navigates to the card that she uses to analyze these checks. Then she logs into Google Drive, where she goes to the form that we created for her to fill out and give us that data. And the spreadsheet generated from that form goes back into Domo, and that is where she finds that analysis again. So you see she's got several different steps in here. She's got to log into 2 places just to input the data that she's working on. And not only that, as an administrator, I have to manage her access to both Domo and Google Drive. So this is kind of a choppy process and situation for everybody. So my solution for this was located in the Domo App Store. It's called the Google Drive IFrame app. And it is this magical portal that, in which you can link a Google Sheet or a Google Form to your Domo instance, so you can make edits directly from your Domo instance, and they show up in your Google document. So let me show you an example of that. So on the left, you can see my Domo instance and a card in which that link is present. And on the right is the Google Sheet itself in Drive. And you can see that I can make edits in Domo, and they show up in real time over in your Google Drive, right? So that's pretty awesome. I think it's so cool. It's like this, it's a magical portal. And it's almost as if you had logged into Google Drive to do this. But you don't have to log in to Google at all. You can just do it from Domo. So Domo, like I said, that was Sheets, and it also supports forms. So this is a view of Chantel's form in Google Drive, and we're going to be pulling this into our Domo instance. And I'm going to walk through a little bit, I'm just going to share a little bit of knowledge about how to install this app, because there are a few little nuances about it that aren't totally easy and clear when you're going through that process on your own. So first of all, after you download the app, you will see a new page, and it's called Google Drive IFrame app, and it provides instructions, and the instructions are very easy to follow. But like I said, it kind of leaves out some things, so I just wanted to help you guys out with that. So first of all, it took me the longest time to figure out how to just open, so this is the page view, to just open this into the card view, to just see the card view. Because when you click around in the body of the card, it won't do it. So you actually have to click on the little blue box to open the card view. It took me forever to figure that out. Also, when you're working with Google Sheets and you want to link a Google Sheet to this app, you want to make sure that you change the settings, the sharing settings, in Google Sheets to be anyone with the link can edit. The reason why you do this is so that users don't have to log into their Google account to make edits, because it gets kind of janky if you don't do that. You can manage the access to this data or this input through Domo itself, through the card sharing or page sharing. And that makes it so you only have to manage the access in one place, which is great for an administrator like me. Once everything's linked up and that link is active, you can move that card anywhere you like. So as you can see, I moved Chantel's form where she inputs her data right next to the card that she uses to analyze the data. So this is super easy for her. She just goes into her card, navigates the card over, inputs her analysis, and she's done. So taking out this process, or streamlining this process for her, made it really simple and very convenient, and she was able to just access everything in one go. And I think giving even a little bit of time back to these people who have these multi-step processes is ultimately more value for the company. Data transformation. So this can be kind of a tricky topic for people who are less technically inclined and are more so business users than technical users. This actually includes myself. I'm not a SQL expert, but Domo has some really incredible tools that are available that are used for data transformation that have users like us specifically in mind. And it really creates, so the data flows that you can use can really create really robust and dynamic data sets that you can use to support your people. So this is Nikita and Romeo. They are managers of our risk center. And the risk center is comprised of about 100 or so representatives who are responsible for validation of the checks. And on a monthly basis, Romeo and Nikita would need to compile this scorecard. And as you can probably tell, this was in Excel. And they would have to get data from all over the place and bring it into Excel for each and every representative. And they would pull in their numbers, and they would score them using weights and goals and special calculations to create an accurate appraisal of their performance. This took an incredibly long time. And I'm sure you'll hear this same story a lot here at Domopalooza, is an Excel process that just took way too long, and this was one of them. Not only that, just not only just the gathering of the data took forever, but if any kind of change was needed, if they wanted to adjust a goal or change a measuring metric, then they would have to change it across all the different representative scorecards, and it was just a mess. And because it was so complicated and because it was so time-consuming, they would only be able to see this comprehensive view of their employees' performance once a month. So a lot of times, change would come too late for the representatives. So they requested that this process be integrated into Domo, which was one of the first things I did for them. So in order to create this complex data set, I would need to make sure that it was robust in that it was able to pull together all those different data sources from the hierarchy, from payroll, from attendance, all the different data sources together in one place so that it can be evaluated all at the same time. It also needed to be flexible. And I don't know why my screens are all like weird looking, but it needed to be flexible enough to be able to change things pretty regularly. So if a goal needed to be changed or a measurement needed to be changed, I needed to be able to do that with relative ease. And also needed to be efficient enough to run on a daily basis. This way, the managers could monitor their employees' performance and make changes before the monthly evaluation. So we need to build a data flow to create this complex data set. And these are the data flows that I use. Is anyone here familiar with the data flows? Good, awesome, great. So we all have our favorite ones. They both are really great at transforming data, and both of them have unique advantages and disadvantages. In short, MagicETL is very user-friendly. It has a drag-and-drop design. It is a tool that was built by Domo. But it's also not very flexible in that the functionality stops at what is built into that tool. So it can't quite take care of every little weird thing that you want to do with this complex data set. Now, MySQL is very flexible. Since it is code-driven, and you can write in whatever you want, but you need the skill and the knowledge to do that. So with great flexibility comes less intuitiveness. So for someone like me who has only basic SQL understanding and just not a ton of skill in SQL, but a high demand of what needs to be done with it, which one should I use? So my answer to that is both, actually. I have found throughout my experience of creating data flows that it's actually most beneficial to connect your data sources to a MagicETL and then connect that output to a MySQL data flow and use that output to power your cards. I'll explain a little bit more about each data flow and each type of data flow to explain a little bit more about why I say that. So MagicETL is a GUI-based tool, as you probably know. It has drag and drop modules that you can connect to perform SQL functions without having to write code. This is great for people like me. I find it most useful when I need to do joins or appends, because it has an auto-indexing feature where I don't need to write in any kind of indexing. Domo just does it. And so I find that it runs a lot faster. Also, I like transforming my columns, be it renaming them or reformatting them in MagicETL, because to me it's a more straightforward process of doing it. Also, there's a mod. I like using MagicETL to perform functions that I don't know how to do in MySQL. Like there's a function called collapsed columns, where you basically turn all of your columns into rows. And I have no idea how to do that in MySQL, but it's pretty easy in MagicETL, and this opens up a lot of opportunities for me as far as doing joins and making complex data sets. The other great thing about MagicETL is the error checking. I can run everything at once, and it will tell me exactly where there's a problem, if there is one, and it will tell me why there's a problem. So I find this a lot easier to validate my data than in MySQL. Now, MySQL, like I said before, is code-driven, so it's very, very flexible. You just write in whatever it is you want, but you need to have the skill. I like to use it to create new columns. So I like to use it for case statements and aggregations, as well as any kind of complex calculations. Now, you can do all these things in MagicETL, but the problem is I actually find it a lot simpler to do it in MySQL, because even for a simple case statement or a simple calculation, it requires more than one module just to produce the same result. And so I just prefer to just write it, because it's more straightforward. The other great thing about MySQL is the commenting feature. This is unique to MySQL. You can't do this in MagicETL, where you can make notes and describe certain things, and you can organize it and make it clean and label things. You can save old code, and that's really useful. Or also, my favorite thing is to just put things in plain English, because sometimes if I write something, I might have to revisit it a few months later. I'm like, what did I do there? So it's good to have that commenting feature to remind me what that function of that transform was. So that's what I did for Nikita and Romeo, is I pulled all those data sources together and put them into a MagicETL, in which I transformed all of those data sets so I could join them together easily and it would run very efficiently. And then I pulled that output into a MySQL data flow, in which I added new columns where I could aggregate and I could produce those scores and those numbers. And that's what I used to power those scorecards. This whole process being in Domo has completely cut down a lot on everyone's time, because everything runs really efficiently and well. And the great thing about using this sequence is it really provides you the most flexibility in management of the data, and makes it so that it avoids the need to switch your cards from one data set to another, because you're connected to the most flexible way of producing that data into those cards. So Nikita and Romeo provided me, they couldn't say enough about how wonderful this process was, and how much time they saved from this process being in Domo, and how easily they could just see all of their representatives' data on a regular basis. So I mentioned shifting cards from one data set to another, and this particular issue has haunted me, because doing this process has produced a lot of errors for me, and a lot of weird ones where I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. So I just wanted to share some insights with you guys about where these errors come from and why, and how to avoid them. First of all, there are several different ways in which you can shift your data sets. You can do it through the data center, and this transfers all your cards at once from one data set to another. Or if you're transferring one card, you can do that from the outside of the card through the card options menu, or the little wrench menu, or inside the card in the builder mode through the analyzer. And that's only one card at a time for those two. So the major problems that you'll see when you shift your cards is mostly going to be broken charts. You'll see errors like this, or you'll see just weird data displaying in your charts. And so this is going to be the most common thing that you'll see. And this is usually due to your columns being differently named or with different formats. So for example, you have two data sets. This is not the same thing. Domo does not recognize these two columns as the same data, even though it's the exact same data, but if the column names are different, Domo doesn't recognize it. It will produce a broken chart. Same if the formatting is different on them. So this can be a tricky thing to catch, but and you will have to go into either data set to correct that and to normalize both of those. The other thing that I wanted to note is that if you use color rules, when you transfer your data sets, or when you transfer your cards from one data set to another, your color rules will not transfer over. You will have to reapply those color rules. Now, the dreaded beast mode merge error. Now, this error took me forever to figure out why it was happening and in what scenarios. So I wanted to share that I wanted to walk you through an example. So this is a card. This is the unique count card. It's displaying a beast mode. And as you can see, it is powered by employee info. And this is that beast mode. It's called unique count. And let's say that I want to transfer this one card from this data set to employee info 2. And I know on employee info 2 there is another beast mode called unique count. Same name, right? Same code, same, it's should work just fine, and so I go to the wrench menu, I say connect and update data, and what happens? I get a merged error. Can anyone, I have a Wonder Woman finger puppet for anyone who can point out why it produced a merged error. That's right, there's a space. There's a space at the end. So Steve Doctor, he's got the Wonder Woman puppets. So yeah, there's a space at the end. This is what produced that merged error. So this happened with just this one card. But imagine if you had gone to the data center on this data set and wanted to shift over all your cards at the same time. Some simple error like this can screw up a bunch of your cards. So this has been something that we have dealt with in the past. So that's not the only weird error that can happen specifically with beast modes. So basically you can have, that merged error is an example of when it has the same name but different code. And the error merged only happens outside the card menu, or outside the card through the wrench menu and through the data center. But if you notice, if you do it in the build mode, it's a different error. It actually overwrites, that beast mode would have overwritten and it would only have overwritten on that card and it wouldn't have shared to the whole data set. Also, if the scenario had been a space in the title and not the code, you would get a different error. You would have a whole new beast mode with that title on it, but it looks the same to you because you don't see the space. So now you would say, oh, I have two unique counts. Why is that? And that's because of a space in the title. Also, through the card analyzer, that same scenario produces a does not exist error and just will not work. Oops, wrong way. So what do we do about this? So really the only thing you can do is just make sure that your column names, your column formatting, your beast mode names, and your beast mode SQL code is the same between the two data sets before you switch it over. And if you're like me and you have a ton of beast modes and a ton of data sets, this is really a tall order. just to make sure that everything is aligned. So my recommendation is to go back to the Domo App Store and look up the connector Domo Governance Datasets. This connector has a ton of really useful reports in it that are specific to your Domo instance and your Domo data, including beast modes. And once you get this connector, and once you download this report, you can use it just like any other data you have in Domo. You can build flows off of it, and you can also build cards off of it. So for this specific scenario, I built this card where I'm displaying the name of the beast mode in the bottom, the occurrence of the beast mode in the y-axis, and the code itself as the series. This allows me to easily see that month of birth date is present in both of these data sets and is aligned on both the name and the code. However, unique count, as in the example that we looked at, even though it has the same name and is present in both data sets, the code is different. And I can easily toggle the quick filters to find out which one is wrong and which one I need to fix. And this has made this process a lot easier, just to pinpoint exactly what is going on in my beast modes. So in conclusion, I hope that I was able to share some useful information with you guys. We talked about the Google iFrame app and how it streamlines user experience. We talked about data flow sequencing and how it can really make your data sets very complex, but also really flexible and efficient. And also we talked about data governance, in which you can spot issues using the beast mode report from the data governance datasets connector, and to correct those errors, or to hopefully avoid those errors that you get from shifting your cards from one data set to another. And thank you very much. That is the end. Thank you. Is there any questions I can answer for anybody?
Can you talk a little bit about how you decide whether to do a calculation in MySQL versus in a beast mode calculation?
Yes. So my general rule for that is, if I'm going to be displaying it, okay, so if I'm going to be aggregating it across multiple things, so let's say it's a count of things, but if I build it in a data flow, it's going to be harder to do that aggregate calculation than it would be in a beast mode. So if I'm like displaying, dates, like the average work time over a period of dates, and if I was to pre-calculate that in a data flow, then I wouldn't be able to summarize or group up those dates, like, let's say, into months, and have it be an accurate average. It would just be an average of those averages. So anything where I'm looking to aggregate it on a grander scale than what I'm displaying, then I do it in a beast mode. If it's something I want to display if I want to filter it on a page, that is when I build it into the data flow itself. Or if I'm wanting to display it in an x-axis, if I want to display a calculation in an x-axis, then I do it in the data flow, because then I can aggregate. So let's say I want to know the number of checks that came through on a given day. I can't count them, and I can't count those aggregates in an x-axis. I can't display those counts in the x-axis. I can only display them in the y-axis. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's my general rule of thumb.
Hello.
Hi.
With the different types of tools that you're using for the Beast Mode versus MySQL versus the MagicETL, are there general performance considerations? Are some tools better speed-wise? And it may be too big of an answer for the conference here, but do some of those components work better performance-wise than others?
Let me just clarify your question. So you're asking if performance-wise, if MagicETL works better than MySQL, or? Sorry.
Potentially, depending on what you're doing with it. It seems like, I'm more on the coder side of things, you may be able to do the exact same thing in any one of those three solutions, Beast Mode, MagicETL, MySQL, or MagicETL. Is one typically a better performing solution than the other two?
Right. Well, like I was saying, the MagicETL tends to run faster if specifically for joins and appends, I have found. So in that way, I feel like the performance is better for that particular function. But but it can be very tricky in MagicETL to just get a simple idea across and have to build it in a flow kind of way rather than just writing it in. So ultimately, I mean, again, I would recommend to try to utilize the strengths of both rather than one or the other, at least until we get a little bit more functionality to write in MagicETL.
I have a question about the beast mode merger error you saw.
Yes.
You showed. Does that mean also for comments or any other sort of white space you have in the beast mode, does it need to be basically exactly the same?
For comments, that's a good question. I have not tested that, so I don't know. But that's a great question. I think that it would still cause an error based on how finicky it is. Because if spaces cause errors, I would say possibly comments cause errors. But I have not actually tested that. So.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a quick question about the Google IFrame.
Yes.
Do you bring the data back into Domo that they enter in using that?
I do. So what you want to do with that is So it supports Sheets, Google Sheets, as well as Google Forms, which Google Forms, of course, creates a Google Sheet. But it's the sheet itself that you pull into Domo, not the IFrame app data. So the IFrame app does not store data. It's not the source of the data. It is purely a visual link. You don't need to run it. Once it's installed, you don't need to run it because it just is. It's linked, you know. But you do need to run the source data, which is that Google Sheet. So that is brought in separately. You're welcome.
One question regarding the merge beast modes. Did you check it with the shared beast modes too? I have a different behavior if I have shared beast modes in Analyzer, but I haven't checked it on the other ones.
Yes, yeah. So for shared beast modes, we try to make a point to share all of our beast modes so that we know they exist. So when we are doing maintenance, we know they exist. Actually, in in that data connector that I was talking about, the governance connector, it has a flag for whether those are shared or not. So you can actually really easily identify your shared beast modes and your non-shared beast modes. But as far as the merged error is concerned, it's in my experience, it's worked the same way. But so like I was saying, if you're reconnecting your cards in the data analyzer, like in the card, it will overwrite it if it's different code. So the code will overwrite, but it will not share. So let's say it's a shared, like in the example, unique count was a shared beast mode. But if I had done that switch through the analyzer, it would have overwritten that unique count to the new unique count with the space in it, but it would only overwrite it in that card, not the entire shared. The shared one would still exist, just not in that card. It's weird, but yeah, it's complicated. But with that governance data set, it's easy to pinpoint which ones are shared and which ones aren't.
I was just going to ask, whenever you're creating like a summary number, do you have to always use a data flow to create that? Because I've had trouble like finding that beast mode that I created as a way to show up as a summary. Like when you go through and look, like it doesn't exist. So is it one of those, if you want a summary number, you have to use a data flow instead of a beast mode?
No, actually, I prefer to use beast modes for my summary numbers for the same reason that I was talking about earlier, because it's aggregating. So the trick to display that, so what's happening is you're looking in the summary number and you can't find your beast mode in the list of options. So what you need to do is you need to aggregate it in your beast mode, because what your beast mode is probably saying, this column plus this column, right? And for some reason it doesn't want to show up in that summary number. So what you need to do instead is say the sum of this, and then it will show up as an option in your summary number. It's looking for an aggregating factor.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
You said that MySQL wasn't in your repertoire originally. Were you able to use some Domo tools to learn how to use the MySQL?
Yes, I was able. MySQL. Really, Domo has a lot of really great videos and really great resources on their knowledge base, as well as in the dojo. And honestly, I YouTubed it a lot. So I would also look on YouTube and just say, I know I want to do this specific thing. I know I want to know how to do this. So I would go off and look at YouTube and figure out, what was needed. And Domo was really great about saying, oh, this isn't valid, this is valid. So Domo's actually taught me a lot of SQL, which is great.
Are there any more questions? Okay. Alrighty. Well, a big round of applause. Thank you for Shannon.
Thanks, guys.